Hello everybody, Captain Murphy here from PiratesAhoy.net. Today we're taking a look at how cloth objects are interacting with the models, and one of the updates that I've made to try to bring all the cloth objects into a line with each other on the ships themselves. Each individual cloth object has its own properties as far as the external acceleration and random acceleration created for it. So whenever you're looking at a cloth object in the game, they are each in their own little world. And that also includes how they respond to colliders. So as it is now, cloth objects no longer respond to the world around them. So if you put a cloth object next to a bunch of objects that have rigid bodies and colliders, it'll just pass right through them because in its world, it has no interaction with them anymore. And it's done simply for performance. So now with the cloth objects, you can put multiple on a scene and they take just about no processing power at all. Whereas before, even a single flag would drop your frames, 10, 15 frames a second. So now we're looking at having 9, 10, 12, 14 per ship, and we've got almost no loss at all. In fact, I've just got a test scene here with 6 ships on it, and I think I dropped about 15 frames a second, and that's with all of these ships running at the same time, and I've also got them all working with the same wind and all that. So it's really a lot better performance, but you're having to modify how you manage things in terms of how the sail interacts. So what I'm going to show you is what I've done as a kind of a simplified variation of this. Since we can't have them interact directly with the ship themselves, what I've got is this is a single cloth object here. And when you look at a cloth object, they have certain properties. So every single one of these vertices where everything meets has a property attached to it. And what you can do is modify the properties of these objects, and what they're called is a constraint. So we're looking at the constraints here. We've got these this setting called cloth constraints. We can change such as the max distance, surface penetration, whether or not there's a constraint to them. Such what I did on this one simply is all of these top ones that you're grabbing up here have a constraint of 0, meaning that these are attached to the parents, or so they're, because this sail is a child of the yard, they're attached to the yard, so they're not going to go anywhere. Then I took and attached each one of these with a slighter, slightly smaller one, a 0.2. So these can move, but not as much. So each one of these sails have been modified so that the corners and the top row have some constraints attached to them, so that way they'll kind of billow and pull against those points. And these objects, because they don't interact with anything else in the system, what I've done is I wrote a simple script for the ship itself that finds all of the sails and all of the cloth objects on the sails, and including all the flags too. Any cloth object on the ship, it finds every one of them. And then it takes and puts a collection of colliders together that are all simplified. They're all either capsules or sphere colliders, and it puts them into a collection and then puts them into the collections that are required for each one of the cloth objects. So each one has its own collection. You can look over here. Each one of these cloth objects has its own collection of capsules and spheres. And so we want to have these sails run into the mast. We want to see them not be able to go through certain things. So my kind of simple solution here was to create a super simplified set of colliders. And so here's our set of colliders here. I didn't place one here. It's kind of my own, forgot about that one. But we've got simple colliders. We've got a 3 of them going vertically. Each one overlaps the mast, and I've got them overlapping just a slight bit more than they normally would, just to make sure the sail doesn't push through by accident. And I also kept a large sphere that covers this area around each one of these platforms. Actually, I think those might be capsules, I believe. Anyway, so they're covering, each one has its own covered area. And so this way, these are the collection that is going to be used to create that collection that the sails will use. So each one of these has that collection added. It's just a reference. It's not an actual new object. So it's just referencing that item. And so then each one of these boats then pulls that collection, and when the sails move, they won't go through those objects, should say easily, because they will go through it. You just have to apply a whole lot of force. Now each one of these sails has a cloth object attached, or a cloth component. So they've got the cloth and then the skinned mesh renderer. And each one of the flags also has a cloth and a skinned mesh. The pennant at the top also has it as well. The one thing about this flag back here is we were toying with using a double-sided mesh versus single-sided. Now that the double-sided is on there, it has goofed the shading all up on it, so just ignore the black flag at the rear now, so that ensign's all messed up. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the scene. I'm going to show you how the system works, and what I've created is a singleton object, a single game manager, and we've referenced this in previous items. A game manager will handle things like cannonball pools and stuff like that. This game manager now also handles the cloth itself. And you can see this cloth looks really good. Right now we've got, there's no wind, so what is happening is the cloth is just responding to the vessel rocking and rolling, and so you can see them just kind of moving around. So yeah, this is just the cloth object just hanging there floating. So there's no other interaction. You can see that the masts are being or the sails are being stopped as they try to go through the masts. One thing that doesn't happen though is you can watch this pennant here just kind of rolls right through the sail itself. And so what we'll probably end up having to do is create another set of capsule colliders that cover the yards, just because that may keep it from going through that area. And it's going to be kind of a testing process to see how many colliders we're going to need. Now the script that works on the ship actually gets all those mast colliders just by name, because it knows that everything called mast collider needs to be in here, and then it puts that inside of that collection. So here we see all of those colliders that we were showing a second ago. It has grabbed that collection, placed each one of these dynamically, so we're not having to do this manually every single time. So now we've got all these objects placed in there. And we've also modified a few properties, some solver frequencies, some continuous collisions, using tethers, things like that. We've got a setting built into the ship object that manages all these settings. That way, even if you do set up a sail object, you don't have to put all the parameters in there. It's managed by the ship's sail object. It overrides all those parameters. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the game object managing here. So here we are looking at. Here we've got all of our ships out here. Just kind of ignore that one that's out there listing, and I'm not sure what happened to its buoyancy object. It went completely batty a little earlier. So we're looking at all these ships here. They've all got cloth objects on all of their sails and all of their ensigns. And if we start modifying the wind, I'm going to grab the actual global manager for this. If I can find it in my pile here. Okay. So here's our game manager. And I've got a new script, just a basic wind manager, which takes a wind direction and a wind speed and converts it into a vector. Vector speeds inside of the new cloth object are now global. So if you apply a vector to the sail object and then spin the sail object in the world, the direction of the wind stays constant even as the sail turns around. It's not a localized vector. So that was one of the first things that's a little bit different. So normally you would have the vector relative to the object rather than relative to the world. So a wind direction of 0 or a vector of 0 with like a director forward would push the wind from the rear to the front. Now if you do a forward direction, it's forward in relation to the world, not relation to the object, which is kind of a neat idea. So here we are with the wind manager. I'm going to go ahead and give it a wind speed. I'll just bump it up to like 25 or so. And so now you can see the wind is actually pushing on all these sails. And like on these vessels back here, you can see that because the direction of the wind is coming, we'll actually look at the ensign from the top here. You can see where the ensign's going. That's the direction the wind's pushing towards. And so by doing that, it's actually rolling in this edge of the sail. But the vessel over here, because it's a little more in line, all of its sails are just nice and billowed. These ones back here are all backing. So they're being pushed up against those colliders that we created. And you can see that those corners are not moving. Or actually they move a little bit, just not much. And then you can see where we've actually attached it to that yard using the constraints up there. They're not moving as well. So here we have just a very basic sail setup. But you can see that we're not responding to any of the colliders that are on the vessel for, like our stays, our lines. nothing else is being, I guess, honored. So we have to create every single one of these manually just for the sails. And if we do that and put them on their own layer and everything like that, then they're not going to be interactable with anything else except the sails. So the sails are going to see them, but nothing else does, which is really what we're trying to get at. But you can see that we've got 6 ships out here. We've got all of them with all of their sails all dynamically being pushed. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of crank the speed up here a little bit so we can watch them. And I'm going to slowly turn the wind. And you'll watch how the sails will actually change in response, but all of them change at the same time. So we're watching the sail, we've just turned it about 180 degrees. And so now these over here are beginning to back, whereas all these are starting to fill. And we can just continue on through, and you'll watch the other sails, begin to lose their wind and then eventually spill out and then begin backing again. So we can now control, you can see how they're buckling the sides in. We're starting to get to that 90-degree point. And now we're full 90, and then we're back into the backing point again. So you can see that all these sails respond at the same time, and that's from a single wind direction. The goal is to have this wind manager tied into everything in the level. So you're going to see the clouds responding, the water responding, trees, all the wind zones that are created for the trees are going to respond to it. Everything from particles, smoke, everything's going to respond to this one single level-based vector. And that way we're not having to recreate and then manage all this separately. We just create one vector and then have everything, referencing that one singleton and pulling it from there. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Just wanted to give you guys kind of a quick look at how the sails are coming along. This is actually also a substance that is being used, so this is all dynamic. The stitching and all that, I just kind of threw a substance together in the afternoon the other day. And this has got dynamic stitching. The normals are created dynamically. All these stains and all that stuff is all created dynamically, so you can make the sails wear and look a little worse and all that. And what we're working on is a shader that allows for translucency, so that when the shadow's on the backs of it, it gives a nice translucent effect. And I've been kind of working on a double-sided shader that has corrected UVs. That way we're not looking at random UVs on the backside, but we still got some kind of odd issues with it we're working on. But yeah, it's come along. Anyway, so I hope you guys enjoyed this. And remember to go to piratesahoy.net to volunteer your time, and to go to heartsofoakgame.com to stay up to date. Thanks.